Going to tap that.
Okay. Oh, got it. No.
All right. Welcome to the Montague Barker Lecture series. And today we are honored to have Mersina Papantoniou.
Yay! Well done.
All right. Mersina founded and led Cross-Cultural Ministries Department through the Anglican Diocese of Sydney, 1987 to 2000. She's been an advisor to government on domestic multicultural issues and received her Ph.D. titled Multiculturalism and its Challenge to Sydney Anglican Identity under the supervision of Professor Stuart Piggin. Her thesis turned into a book titled Multiculturalism's Challenge to Sydney Anglican Identity and will be published through Regnum. Her interests include the progression to modernism, neoliberalism, and radicalization polarization affecting Christian belief. And with that, I will turn it over to you, Mersina.
Okay. Oh, thank you very much. Hello, good people there in London. In Oxford, I'm sorry, Oxford. I greet you from the lands of the Eora of the Wongal Indigenous tribes from New South Wales. In my Greek Orthodox tradition, in which I was raised, I bid you, Christos Anesti, Christ has risen, and your response?
He is risen indeed.
Alithos Anesti, yes, he has risen indeed. By way of introduction, the topic for this paper came up in an intense discussion with Tom Harvey that you have in your midst, regarding some of the research I was doing at the time, and when I visited OCMS and Regnum September 2022, there in beautiful, verdant Oxford. I give a special hello to Elisabetta Santos from Regnum as well, and Paul Bendor Samuel. I dedicate this lecture in memory of the late Bishop John Reid of the Southern Region of the Sydney Anglican Diocese, the late Canon Alan Whittam, General Secretary of the Anglican Home Mission Society, Sydney, and the Reverend Dr. Bill Lawton, Senior Lecturer at Church History, Moore College, who all nurtured my faith as an orphan when I was converted. So let's begin, good people. Okay, I'll just go down here and we go to our next slide. So what I'll do is I'll put you up here. Now, hopefully you can see. Yeah, can you see the slide?
Yes.
Okay, cool. We have here a picture of what Australia has been looking like. And we see, just for the purpose of this graph, of the overseas born, 49% of this number here were born in a non-English speaking background country. This is the terminology we use here in Australia. And we find that when you combine these two figures, you have approximately 1 in 4 people either have a connection to a parent born overseas or they're born overseas. However, what is very stark here is that one of the largest groupings becomes the no religion category. And we know that the Muslim adherents are some of the largest in terms of growing religions that are happening in Australia. Okay, we'll go to the next slide. More Australians, and in terms of this lecture, this is what I'm trying to research. More Australians are identifying as having no religion than any other category. This is from the 2021 census. So we have in 2016, 30.1%, and then we have in 2021, 38.9%. So while Christians as a whole remained the #1 religious group with 43.9% of the population identifying with some form of Christianity, the no religion was the #1 individual religious affiliation, right? With Catholic adherents a distant second. So this is how this is traveling the no religion category in 2021. Next slide. I'd like to bring up a snapshot of cities. We know that in 2014, the UN report notes that in 1990, there were 10 megacities with 10 million inhabitants that were home to 153 million people, or slightly less than 7% of the global urban population at the time. In 2014, there are 28 megacities, and of today's 28 megacities, 16 are located in Asia, 4 in Latin America, 3 each in Africa and Europe, and 2 in North America. By 2030, which is 7 years away, the world is projected to have 41 megacities with 10 million inhabitants or more. But yet I recall missiologists like Roger Greenway and Harvey Conn were publishing a journal that featured urban ministry case studies from cities around the world. And the journal was called Urban Mission, published by Westminster Theological Seminary. And they also published my article back then in 1994 called Sydney, Cross-Cultural Ministry and the Anglicans. It became clear to those who wanted to see cross-cultural mission progress, who recognized the bejeweled city in all its splendor, yet displaying an underbelly of homelessness, poverty, and hunger, both spiritual and physical. I'm making a case here for urban mission and why we need to consider cross-cultural ministry in urban mission. A concept social scientists have analysed in understanding first world societies is the secularization process, this here. And this is the process by which sacred beliefs are weakened over time. Religion becomes less influential in social life, and scientific and other rationalist worldviews come to dominate. In the West, these tend to emphasize the transition from a Christian worldview, which described the social and natural world as reflections of the divine will, to a progressively human-centered worldview. Now, this is a contested concept, as you know. However, with the project of enlightenment being brought forward into what some social scientists call modernity, we see reason or rationality triumphing over religious faith, especially when religion was understood as the opiate of the masses, written by Karl Marx in 1843. However, currently in the social sciences, we see a reversal. Matters of faith are being welcomed into the public square. The impact of polyethnicity commingles with such migrations. But we also see the rise in the West of Islamophobia. The secularization thesis I consider assumed church-going with faith in religion and or spirituality. We now see a new trend, spiritual but not religious category. In further support of this thesis, some scholars such as David Voas and Steve Bruce, and here they are, in the UK have argued the rise of the spiritual but not religious is actually part of a general movement away from religion into secularism. So many of these people act in secular ways and in time will drop all reference to the spiritual. But this is still in study, in research, in flux. I'm reminded here of St. Paul walking into Athens and how glorious that city must have been. the book of Acts. And he says something like, Athenians, I see that in every way you are very religious. But now come into this world. How religious are we? Or in fact, has the term reverted back to how spiritual are we? In some respects, spirituality is being reduced to secular forms. And Coretta and King, 2005, are supporting this thesis, having suggested that this is ultimately a consumer-driven way of turning what was religious into something marketable to the individual. On the other hand, the protests against secularism and religion may remain, yet people look for resources which nurture their spirit. They find those resources in nature, often in meditation and forms of contemplation, in pilgrimage and reflective travel, in music and art, as well as in massages and aromatherapies. Some find nurture through educational programs and philosophical discussion. Some are engaged in social justice and political action. Many who do not use the language of spirituality join people in these activities and also look for that which contributes to personal and communal well-being. So in Australia, the SEIROS, S-E-I-R-O-S, have done a survey in 2016, which find that people are still searching for nurture, for a spirituality, yes, within religious confines, but also out of that. And you can find that in the Australian journal Pointers. This is in contradistinction to the Cartesian dictum, I think, therefore I am. Yeah? The great cogito ergo sum. Once again, social scientists are coming to terms that one can have both faith and hope as a basis for the human condition. Yes, accompanied by reason, without necessarily being on opiates. Some of the greatest achievements in this world have happened because of faith and hope, even for those who did not see the outcome of their mortal labours. So the understanding of worldview for urban missiologists cannot be disregarded, as our secular and sacred study of anthropology has revealed all along. I want to go now to the verse in Hebrews 11:1, and I want to hold on to that. Now faith is confidence in what we hope for, and assurance about what we do not see. We have hope as Christians and as urban missiologists. I need now, in order to understand 21st century culture, we've got to put some hard hats on, because I need to read to you a bit of Nietzsche. I'm doing something different in this presentation. I'm supporting the fact that I think Nietzsche and his writing has much to do with postmodernism. That is the transition of modernity, the Enlightenment, to supposedly where we are now. Now, postmodernism is a very slippery concept. You can almost think of an eel. Just when you've grabbed it, it gets away. It is, if it hasn't bit you first. So just some of you might not like this, I'm sorry, but I need to trace this back into postmodernism, because I think this is where we are. From the gay or happy fröhliche science, and Nietzsche is using the term for merry or happy just as you would for Christmas or Easter. And he is the son of a Lutheran minister. Anyway, so the gay or happy science. And he writes, God is dead, God remains dead, and we have killed him. How shall we comfort ourselves, the murderers of all murderers? Is not the greatness of this deed too great for us? Must we ourselves not become gods simply to appear worthy of it? And to add to the complexity of the postmodern condition, because I think so much can be traced back here, Nietzsche asks in his 1873 work, Truth and Lies in an Extra Moral Sense, what is truth? Truth are illusions with which we have forgotten our illusions. They are metaphors. They have become worn out and have been drained of sensuous force. And here it reminds one of the superficialities of advertising, which after all has only one aim. Instead of the Sermon on the Mount, we have the following. What is good? Whatever augments the feeling of power, the will to power. Remember that. Power itself in man. What is evil? Whatever springs from weakness. What is happiness? The feeling that power increases. The resistance must be overcome. Not contentment, but more power. Not peace at any price, but war. Not virtue, but efficiency. Virtue free of morality. The weak and the botched shall perish. First principle of our charity, and that's his italics, and one should help them to it. What is more harmful than any vice? A practical sympathy for the botched and the weak Christianity. That was written in 1895. Now, added to this, his concept of ressentiment. Now, this is a French word. It's been translated in the French. In English, it's not merely resentment, but an aggrieved entitlement. Okay, so Nietzsche is sick of being lowly. He wants the powerful. So for Nietzsche, Christianity resonates with weakness, lowliness, ugliness, sickliness, and misery as they become idealized objects of compassion, whilst the resented strength, wealth, enjoyment, and vitality are viewed as forms of sinfulness. So in postmodernism, we see all truth is relative. And here we see the processes of a post-Christian belief. But we also, in the postmodern condition, see the shifting of even more goalposts. Paul Lyotard, Derrida, and Foucault, as philosophers of postmodernism, there is no meta-narrative here. What we need to do is to deconstruct, or from Heidegger, a destruction of contemporary institutions that once may have been created for the common good of all, once having a Christian basis within the society. So it is here, as a form of postmodernism, we come to post-Christendom. And these are, I'm arguing, these are aspects of postmodernism. Okay, so defining post-Christendom. It is the culture that emerges as the Christian faith loses coherence within a society that has been definitively shaped by the Christian story. And as the institutions that have been developed to express Christian convictions decline in influence. Post-Christendom refers to the changing place of Christian community in a complex society that is increasingly unfamiliar with the gospel and culturally more distant from the churches. Post-Christendom offers an opportunity to reconsider theological, ethical, and ecclesial issues once the Christendom blinkers are removed. This challenge is to think and act as cross-cultural ministries. So for us, instead of this being at the periphery as what once would have held within a majority culture, mission is for the diehards, because we're the majority culture, people go to church, and therefore, cross-cultural mission is on the periphery. No, it is argued here by Murray Williams that cross-cultural mission needs to be brought to the centre in urban mission. I completely agree with him. The next facet of postmodernism I'd like to put, anyway, I've got to talk political concepts here, so bear with me. It was a term coined by political sociologist Colin Crouch from Warwick University, UK, where we see a transition to a post-democratic society as a mechanism in our first world political system. The term implies that the culture that uses, the Enlightenment, belief in rationality, logic, principles of science, but departs from them in search for new possibilities. A post-democratic society, therefore, is one that continues to have and to use all the institutions of democracy, but in which they become a formal shell. And this is very important. The energy and innovative drive pass away from the democratic arena and into small circles of a politico-economic elite. The understanding of hollowing out, because I want you to hold on to that concept regarding Crouch's post-democracy concept, is a step taken further by political scientist and ordained Presbyterian minister, American Chris Hedges. And he explains, the sophisticated technologies of corporate control, intimidation, and mass manipulation far bypass those employed by a previous age. They are effectively masked by glitter, noise, and an abundance of a consumer society. Political participation and civil liberties are gradually surrendered. Corporations hiding behind this smokescreen devour us from the inside out, the hollowing out. They have no allegiance to the country. Now, I want to bring into this Robert Beller's concept of American civil religion, because this is part of it as well. So we hold on to the part of hollowing out, which is very important. But this basic idea is that in advanced industrial societies, of which our first world society is, they're becoming increasingly secular in terms of institutional religions. Civic religions, such as the celebration of the state or civil society, now serve the functions of prescribing the overall values of society, providing social cohesion, facilitating emotional expression. In other words, civil religions offer a functional equivalent or functional alternative to institutional religions, since they meet the same needs within the social system. Okay. So, and I'll go to the next slide here, and it kind of reminds me of this. We have, if we can put a Christian faith on solid ground, and the roadrunner over here is being the smarty pants. I don't know if you're familiar with these cartoons. They're from Warner Brothers. Anyway, this was called the Roadrunner. And this character here is called Wile E. Coyote. So he spends his whole life running out chasing this person here. But then just when he thinks he's got him, because he's a big know-all, guess what? He falls off the cliff. But there are a few seconds there where he thinks he's got this fella over here. But he looks and he's actually falling off the cliff. The point of the cartoon is momentarily he remains in midair. Okay. And this is, for me, the West ditching the concept of a Christian God. The mistake is it's way down, the way is down. So disregarding matters of Christian faith and hope in this secular worldview, the character Wile E. Coyote recognizes his error, but it's all too late for him. Okay. All right. So we've learned that the grand narrative or grand story in postmodernism doesn't exist. What does exist are meta-narratives, components of the story that is meant to, you're meant to deconstruct these meta-narratives in order to look for what is systems of inequality. What we find is social fragmentation based on age, demography, common interests, and spirituality. What's helpful here is the Lausanne group on world evangelization have got a terrific paper on this, and it is Lausanne Occasional Paper 45, and I'd encourage you to view it. And it's called Religious and Non-Religious Spirituality in a Postmodern World. So they're looking at this hollowing out of these systems. Okay. Okay, next slide. So what is the zeitgeist of the present? Can we find out what it is? What is it? What is the culture in which so much of this is rambling around? Can we make sense of it? Well, according to the postmodernists, we have two features, what they call woke, and it simply means a questioning of the dominant narrative pertaining to privilege. And it's from an African-American trope called from awake, you are now woke, and what you didn't see before, now your eyes do see. And you're awoke to the systemic mechanisms that progress inequality. One cannot go back and unsee it. So the second point is identity politics as part of this stream of the breaking down of the ideas of the zeitgeist. So identity politics is most strongly associated with a wave of political organisation and contestation launched by Black activists in the 1960s and then continued by the women's movement, other minority movements, the gay pride movement. Most recently has been co-opted by conservative identity movements such as the Christian Coalition and white supremacist groups. Identity politics has evolved into a potent rhetorical device for mobilizing members of populations that feel marginalized or mistreated. The term also has connotations in post-colonial studies as to the contested role of minorities. Okay, so now we're going to go into the Great Replacement theory. And this is what it is. I'm making the argument that the Great Replacement theory is a form of post-multiculturalism. So here we go, good people. The Great Replacement theory has earlier iterations as the Eurabia theory and is a conspiracy theory, which used to reside in the dark areas of the net, but now has reached the mainstream. And based on Islamophobia, Eurabia means to destroy white European civilization. Renaud Camus, no relation to Albert Camus, the existentialist, titled his book Le Grand Replacement, and this is simply the Great Replacement. And he explains the replacement of a people, the indigenous French people, by one or others of its culture, by the loss of its cultural identity through multiculturalism. He has singled out Muslims for not wanting to integrate using phenotypical markers, the veil, into French society. Contrary to those who proclaim there is no overarching narrative to our time, for these people who uphold the Great Replacement theory, it is an overarching meta-narrative. This reality is understood to conform to this lens and allows for radicalization towards violence. The process of replacement, Camus writes, is that native white Europeans are being reverse colonized by Black and brown immigrants who are flooding the European continent in what amounts to an extinction level event for white people, a white genocide. And when you look up white genocide on YouTube, you find over 50,000 videos, and trust me, I haven't gone through them all. This is a testament of how the term replacement has resonated and now sits mainstreamed in our contemporary society. Camus' sights are particularly set on the Muslims whom he claims hate France and want to subjugate it via higher birth rates than white women, another form of replacement. A Pew Forum study published in January 2011 estimated 4.7 million Muslims in France. Yet in 2030, they estimate it'll be 6.9 million. Camus has publicly supported Marine Le Pen of the National Rally Political Party France, and he claims we are, after all, primarily a European people of the white race, Greek and Latin culture, and the Christian religion. But from a mission perspective, here Europeans, as followers of a Christian religion, may possibly be in name only, as church attendance has been decreasing continually for decades. And you can find this in Pew research titled Nuns, N-O-N-E-S, on the Rise. On a personal note, here the baby, a living Christian belief, has been ditched with the bathwater and currently represents one of the greatest challenges to First World Christian mission. Yet conversely, in my 15 years of ministry heading up the Department of Cross-Cultural Ministries in the Anglican Diocese of Sydney, I noted almost all migrant and refugees we ministered to had what I termed a belief in God factor. It was not foreign in this context to speak about God in daily life, not even a Christian God in whom we ministered a practical message of hope and addressed practical needs. This included congregations ministering to asylum seekers in detention centres, churches sponsoring refugee families to Australia through immigration programs. The department inherited 7 ongoing NESB non-English speaking background ministries and grew the work of home mission to over 50 NESB ministries in Sydney, Australia. I obtained a government grant to write anti-racism workshops that were pioneered in parishes for another decade. We were described as one of the most successful CCM departments in the world at the time by noted US missiologist Sherwood Lincoln-Felter. So, the Great Replacement Theory has provided a theoretical track to which there are no international obligations. There are no obligations for the stranger, the sojourner, unlike the Old and New Testament construction of caring for the stranger in our midst. Here, the remarkable statutory organisations created after 2 world wars, the Refugee Convention, UNHCR, the World Health Organization, the Food Relief Program, and the United Nations Human Rights Charter are of no consequence. Society is understood between nativists, and they don't mean Indigenous populations. It became apparent to me through the Cronulla riots here in 2015. A slogan here was, "We grew here, but you flew here." And migrants and refugees are understood as invaders or invasions in this ideology, and that word comes up continually. These movements embrace anti-immigration, anti-migrant, anti-refugee, Eurosceptic, and use migrants and refugees as scapegoats. So here we have Steve Bannon who was the brains trust behind the election of Donald Trump in the 2016 election, invited to speak at the annual Congress, the National Rally in France in March 2018. Right. Although Camus does not advocate violence for the Great Replacement theory, he uses double messages constantly, and they are invasion, invaders, which signifies a call to arms. The messages from the Great Replacement theory has galvanized and united extreme right-wing groups with fear, threats, and violence. In this context, it should be no surprise that the Australian intelligence agency ASIO in 2021 and the American FBI in 2020 have recently announced that the principal source of domestic terrorism is white supremacist ideology. Certain key themes are repeated in the manifestos of the Norway and Christchurch shooters, as well as the El Paso shooter. And no, I won't name them, and I won't put up the access to their manifesto. They sit squarely, they name squarely the problem is multiculturalism. Okay, now going through this, and I went through their manifestos, my training in psychology troubled me reading this stuff. And some of the characteristics were that these were men in their youth. It showed that young people are not necessarily tied to kinships, organizations. Research reveals they base their conclusions on their own research, individual experiences, and personal relationships, instead of, say, the truth accepted by their parents, government, or church. This signifies an individualist trope rather than a collective orientation from cross-cultural psychology. This also lends itself to be radicalized online. Yeah. What troubled me as well was that I understood that these people seemed what the psychoanalyst Sprengler writes as fatherless. They don't seem to have an anchor in any of this. And Sprengler refers to a fatherless society. So on the 22nd of July, 2011, and I'm using his pseudonym, Andrew Berwick killed 8 people by detonating a van bomb in Oslo, then shot dead 69 attendees of a youth summer camp for the up-and-coming leaders of progressive movements in Norway on the island of Utøya, a total of 77 people. He cites white Europeans as oppressed people, and he sees European identity formed through the fires of wars with Muslim enslavers, he calls him. The war is depicted as an ongoing clash of civilizations for the heart and soul of white, what we consider nominal Christians, as opposed to a growing Muslim Europe. Despite claiming that he did not have a personal relationship with Jesus, Berwick recognized a cultural Christendom. Remember Bella's point of the hollowing out of institutions, with the superiority of European culture defined by him as Christian, surpassing all others. Though in 2015, he admonished that there are few things in this world more pathetic than the Jesus figure and his message. Berwick declares that many Europeans recognize that multiculturalism is leading their societies to disasters. What's troubling is that when we come to seeing the influence of what happened in 2011 with Berwick, he is credited in the manifesto of the, let's get this, no, let's see if we can get this higher, with influencing the Christchurch shooter and then the El Paso shooter. No, I can't seem to. Can I get this? No. I tried to fit it in. This is such an incredible graph. Up here, we have the, we have the Christchurch shooter, and we see from about 2015, 2014, a whole lot of racist killings, which is shocking. It can be led back to this person here. A thing that they did was put their manifestos online shortly before they went about their killing sprees. And the Christchurch shooter even live streamed what he did, which is shocking, which had not been done before. Now, I won't go into the details of some of this work, but for the Christchurch shooter, he says something really peculiar. He says, those that are in the minority are oppressed. If you become a social, political, or ethnic minority, it will lead to your oppression. Minorities are never treated well. Do not become one. But maybe some of us are. Some of us engaged in cross-cultural mission. Maybe we are in the minority. Maybe the Christian religion began as a minority in First World Palestine. I don't see that as a problem. Now, I'll bring you over here. In 2016, the white born-again evangelical Christian cohort votes for Trump. And they vote for Trump higher than any other previous cycle. As you can see, 2012, 2008. And it's this cohort that troubles me a great deal. Okay. Go to the next slide. Okay, so where are you? Okay.
Read it.
Oh, okay. It's not there. What I'd like to do now, I will go to a bit of the video that I want to play. So if it's okay with you guys, you can have a little break or something like that. Is that all right, Tom? Because I've got to get this video up because it's very important.
Okay, go ahead and get the video out. We'll wait, so go ahead.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Okay. Okay, now, how do I do this? Oh, here we are. Yes, here we are. All right, folks, here we go. Now, this event takes place approximately 9 months after the election of Donald Trump. So let's go.
I don't think she can play one because her PowerPoint is on. Even if
I think what you need to do Mersina, is to
Yes.
open up another window on your computer, and then,
Yes.
and then once you have that ready to go, then change the screen share, and then go with the video on YouTube. So you'll change
Okay.
your screen share,
You
but
need
you
to
can't play
Right.
it directly from the PowerPoint.
you need to
Oh, I
share.
can't.
from-
I can't. Okay, all right. So let's see if I can do this. Oh, crumbs, this is very technical for me. Okay, so I stop sharing. Is that what I do?
Yeah.
Yeah, stop sharing,
and
Okay,
play the
yes.
video.
and then now get the video up on your YouTube.
Yeah, play your video.
Yeah, find your video and start to play it, and then you
Play it.
share that screen.
Okay, so hang on. And I share that screen.
Yeah.
You play the video. Yeah.
Oh, I see. Oh, all right. Let's see if we can do this. Okay.
Possible. Don't panic. It's possible.
I wonder we can play it.
Yeah, maybe.
Sorry, can you hear that or not?
No, we can't hear it now. You need to share the screen that's showing the video.
Okay.
So go back
Share-
to share screen and then click on your,
Yeah.
on the YouTube screen on share.
And also share sound as well.
Yeah. Is it the,
Oh, it's still going. It's still going. Oh, it's still going.
maybe we can do it from our end. So why don't you go back to your, or just stop sharing the screen, stop share.
Okay, all right. No, it doesn't want to stop for some reason. This is crazy. All right. I don't know.
Is that ours? That's gonna be.
No, it's not ours.
Because it's not right.
If you put the link on the chat, I can copy it and then.
Yeah, put the link for the YouTube on the chat.
Okay, how on earth do I get out of here? How on earth do I do this? I don't know.
The video.
I can't even stop it. Okay, I don't, wow. It's not wanting to,
Just close it.
it's,
Close the YouTube.
I wish I knew, this is amazing. Close the YouTube. Okay, how do I do that?
Should be on your screen. And
I
just,
don't know how. Yeah,
or just let it go and we will pull up the video on our end. So you don't have to worry about it at all.
okay. Yes, please, that would be great. I'm terribly
Okay, so
sorry. I don't know how to.
Yeah, now, do you have, what's the video you're wanting to show?
Yeah. I don't e- I'm a bit lost here.
But we need to know what
Um,
video you want to show so we can get it and show it.
Okay.
What video are you showing?
I can't even get out of the YouTube.
Don't worry
I
about
don't
it.
even,
Just tell us what video you're showing.
lovely. Okay. We are seeing, yeah, we are seeing YouTube, PBS, independent broadcaster, a year after Charlottesville.
Okay.
Idea after Charlottesville.
Yeah, a year after Charlottesville.
No, you don't need that.
Yes,
Yes.
And it's in the, I'd still put year after Charlotte.
Yeah.
Yeah, after.
Charlotte.
Charlottesville.
Charlotte. SVILLE.
Yeah.
Yeah, SVILLE. VILE. And then hit return. Yes.
Is it this one? Documenting peaks.
Hey, Charlottesville, is that it? PBS Frontline?
Yes, a year after Charlottesville. Hang on, I'll put it, I think, can you see? Oh, how now what happened? I don't know how I did that. There is the link there. Can you see that?
No, unless you share screen, we can't see.
I'll put it in the chat.
Put it in the chat box.
Put it in the chat box.
Oh, how do I do that?
Copy and paste.
Yeah, is that right? Okay, let's go. Where were you? Here. Oh, I don't. I had it a moment ago.
Yeah, we
Oh,
could.
there it is. So I copy. No, it's not letting me. No. Oh, how do I do this? There it is. Can you, is it, oh, you can't see it. Okay, it's YouTube, HTTPS,
Type.
:// YOUTU.B.
We can't read that.
Show it on the PowerPoint. I'll take a picture.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
yes.
share.
Put it on screen.
Oh, really?
Oh, we got it. That's all right.
Oh, how
Yeah,
do
you
I don't know.
Is it working on it?
Yes, I got it. GPEX.
I've done it so many times and I don't know what happened, but anyway, so there you go.
And the problem is sharing screen, it gets a little tricky.
I, little q, and 0. Let's try the 0. So I think you've got a full stop between the U and the B.
No.
We're so close. 7GPEX.
I get it. I don't know how to. I don't know. We've stopped
Maybe
sharing.
we just need to go on with the lecture. You can just tell us what the point you made.
Okay. Okay.
She's just gonna go on.
Yeah, I can't see you though. I want to be able to see you in order to talk to you somehow.
All right. Okay, you can't see us.
No, I can't. Can you see me?
Yeah, we see you and everything seems to be working now, right?
Oh, I can't see. I can't see you, and I can't move the slides for some reason.
I think
your laptop is frozen.
yeah, your laptop's locked
Yeah.
out.
Okay. All right. Well,
You could do Mersina's the best way to do it. Go ahead,
what do we do? Yes.
go ahead and exit. And then
Oh.
come back in and join us, and then you'll see us all, then finish the lecture.
Oh, there you are. Great.
Oh, you see us now?
Okay. Yes.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
All right, well, so go ahead and finish then.
Yes.
go.
Lovely. All right. Okay. But my slides are not here. But anyway. And we're up to. Can you see the slides now or not?
Oh, but you're not sharing your screen.
Oh, how do we do that?
So you go down to
Okay.
your button and you push share screen.
Yes,
you go
gotcha. There you go. Share.
That's it.
Oh, good. Okay. Okay.
There we are, we're back, okay.
Oh, gee whiz. The idea of the YouTube that I wished I could show you back here is that the Charlottesville rally happened over 2 days.
Yeah,
All the dormant groups came out. Like, I didn't know that the Ku Klux Klan still existed, but they did. The QAnon, the Ku Klux Klan, people like that, they all came out. And they're loud and proud, and this is who we are. And one of them got into a car and rammed into the protesters,
right.
killing a woman called Heather Heyer And so there are problems here in that what we saw from the evangelical cohort that voted for Trump in 2016 at 81%, and they were 78% in the 2020 election, have fused the idea of American exceptionalism, the chosen people, with a Christian America. But in effect, though, when we look at their institutions, where we look at the democratic concept that I mentioned before, post-democracy, identity politics, the zeitgeist, of being woke, you have a whole lot of populations that say, well, no, actually, this was built on slavery. This was built on inequality. You're wealthy because this was built on these systems. And now that we are woke, we are challenging this. So we saw with President Trump that he used words consistently: invasion, caravan, big beautiful wall, Mexicans are rapists. And this is indeed a targeted message. Trump's language further emboldened white nationalists and became a strategy for his re-election, culminating in the storming of the Capitol on January 6, 2021. So we have this very exclusionary rhetoric that does a whole lot in unsettling minorities, ethnic minorities that make up this great country of America, or that make up Australia, the first world industrial societies. For those who are still unconvinced as to the dog whistling, energizing religious white nationalists, go to Trump's campaign speech on the anniversary of the storming of the Branch Davidian sect at Waco, Texas, which raises grave concerns regarding the march of hollowed out civil religion, just as Robert Bellah had described in the 1960s. So now we go to, next slide. Okay, so you've seen that.
Presentation.
Okay, so there we are. Can you see this?
Yes.
Okay,
That's
cool.
Donald Trump with the Bible.
Yes, I don't know what your reactions are to this, but we can certainly discuss it. I want to go to the Christian response now. Okay. Australia was very fortunate to have the Reverend Dr. David Penman, who was also on the committee for the Australian Institute for Social Policy. And it was called AIMA back in its day. And he writes that the founding documents for Australia's multiculturalism is actually a Christian manifesto for the Australian church and state. And I'll read to you some of his description of how he saw Australia's multicultural policy. This was so important that in 1994, when Prince Charles came to Sydney, Australia, he actually asked to have an audience with the government advisors on multiculturalism. I was one of them. The meeting was videotaped. And he wanted to know, which I thought was so pertinent, why is Australia's multiculturalism successful? So let's go to what the Reverend Dr. David Penman has written. He was formerly a missionary in the Middle East and was a fluent Arabic speaker. He was one of the hidden brokers for the release of the Archbishop of Canterbury's envoy, Terry Waite, who was captured by the Hezbollah in 1987, and a former chair of the Australian Institute for Multicultural Affairs, which was then the premier advisory body to the federal government. He advocates for Christians, above all, Multiculturalism is a social justice issue. If the word and ideal were not here, we would need to formulate a term and social policy to fill the gap. I'm convinced that multiculturalism is currently formulated in official documents, and this is the National Agenda for Multicultural Australia that his organisation, the peak body, had input into in 1989, is the best solution available for the issues posed by the cultural diversity of the Australian population. Indeed, I would challenge the critics to come up with a better policy that would take account of all the needs in the equation. Moreover, I believe the twin pillars of multiculturalism are embedded in Christian theology, and they are stated in the final report of the Australian Institute of Multicultural Affairs. 1, a recognition and affirmation of the diverse cultural, ethnic, linguistic and religious backgrounds of Australian people, the promotion of equality of opportunity for all Australians, irrespective of backgrounds. He writes, there seems to be a perverse view around that multiculturalism weakens social cohesion. The contrary is the truth. The best way to heighten tensions and conflict is to deny a group its aspirations while asserting our own legitimacy in claiming the same aspirations in ourselves. So the original documents back in the 1989 agenda revolve around these points, and I'll get to them quickly. A cultural identity, the right of all Australians within carefully defined limits to express and share their individual cultural heritage, including their language and religion. Social justice, the right of all Australians to equality of treatment and opportunity, and the removal of barriers of race, ethnicity, culture, religion, language, gender, and or place of birth, which is done through the Racial Discrimination Act, which is the foundational law that we have. Economic efficiency, the need to maintain, develop and utilise effectively the skills and talents of all Australians, regardless of background. Multicultural policies require all Australians to accept the basic structures and principles of Australian society, the Constitution and the rule of law, tolerance and equality, parliamentary democracy, freedom of speech and religion, English as the national language and equality of the sexes. Lastly, multicultural policies impose obligations as well as conferring rights. The rights to express one's culture and beliefs involves a reciprocal responsibility to accept the right of others to express their views and values. So, do our churches resemble our local communities? And we're talking very multicultural, we're talking first world society, urban communities. Are we inclusive and welcoming of cultures that do not resemble our own? Christian worshipping communities have given people groups over centuries an identity, a community for whom in kindness and gentleness there is no law, a sense of belonging imbued with solidarity and standing against the tide of wanton destruction. From anthropologist Michael Tausig, we learn racism is anything but simple. Is there a prophetic role for the church rather than seeing the dichotomy of friend or enemy as a way of keeping social order? The inevitability of a more egalitarian, multicultural functioning society calls us to address the scourge of everyday racism, whether black, white, or brindle. And who is it that we exclude, and why? The Christian lessons learned from the parable of the Good Samaritan seem millennia away to what journalist Jamil Bowie has described as the joy of hatred, which is what the great replacement theory represents. The time has already come to practice resistance to the flatlining conformity undergirding a community solidarity based on fear. Again, a reminder from the New Testament, there is no fear in love, but perfect love drives out fear. An African-American novelist, James Baldwin, in 1962 wrote, A letter to my nephew, which is the title. He writes, please try to remember that what they believe as well as what they do and cause you to endure does not testify to your inferiority, but to their inhumanity. Go to our next slide. The clarion call for institutions and social movements to continually address the stain of racism, root and branch, must include anti-racism training, not on the periphery, not just for cross-cultural ministry, but throughout the disciplines of the church, the institutions of the church, and training is now of the utmost urgency. Action taken will require sacred and secular interdisciplinary resources in understanding our contemporary society to stop the relentless, slithering, writhing movement of racism, covert, overt, and or both. And I decided to add in these, the icon from the tradition that I was born into, the Orthodox Church. And they were actually drawn initially for the people who couldn't read. Here we have the MAGA Jesus that actually took a still from video footage from the January 6th Capitol protesters. And here we have Jesus wearing the cap here, you might not be able to see it, that says, "Make America Great Again." So there is my lecture.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Mersina. And we can open it now for comments or questions that they might have. One of the things that I would just start things off, one of the things I recommend taking a look at is an older book now, it's written in the 1980s, but it was by a man named Alistair McIntyre called After Virtue. And what he describes there is what he calls a disquieting suggestion. And what he argues is that when any kind of narrative that has held together an intellectual tradition, especially in terms of ethics and morals, that what you break down into is just groups shouting at each other. They use ethical words and moral language, but the moral language is meaningless because the actual relationship of the words to the what they meant within a conversation where everybody agreed as to what those words mean has now disappeared. And you brought out what is really truly disturbing in both Europe and North America is that you get this breakdown. But what I would argue is that's across the board, which makes it a much more debilitating than we would like to think.
Yes.
So what we have now, I would argue, politically, socially, culturally, is people shouting at each other. And we have polarization going on. And now in cities where these demonstrations go on, they have to block them off from each other. But it's only a matter of time, especially in the United States, where you can walk around with a firearm, that people with AR-15s are going to lower those AR-14s and start shooting each other. And I really do think we're at the absolute edge of massive violence. In fact, I was reading one report yesterday that of these kind of mass demonstrations where you have all these people gathering from different sides, there's a 16% chance of violence. That's significant. And more people are coming to these things armed with serious weaponry.
Yes.
And it's only, but the only thing I'd say is you cast one side of it, but it's both sides carrying the guns. And if you think there's a good side,
it was in the video. Yes, it was in the video. Yep.
There's people all from all kinds of different perspectives that are now turning to violence because there's no common language. Now, how the Christians respond to this, I don't know, because it certainly isn't, but anyway, I've always gone back and read McIntyre, and I think he had his finger on it back in 1980. And now that day is fully run. But anyway, let's open it up to our other, if you're online, you could push reactions and then raise your hand, and I will recognize that. Anybody here? Okay,
Yeah. Hey, so I've got a dog in this fight, and that I was pastoring a church in St. Louis when Michael Brown was shot. And our church hosted a lot of Black Lives Matter rallies, and we even describe ourselves as woke. And so a lot of what I'm going to say is not, I mean, it's self-education, but not from any sort of academic discipline per se. But I think I was really tense as you were using terms that have evolved over time.
Yes.
So, for example, woke didn't always mean what it means today, even 4 years ago, 3 years ago, 5 years ago.
Yes.
It's evolved. The Black Lives Matter movement has evolved such that our church would get in trouble if we associated with Black Lives Matter because of its, its acquiescing to certain cultural Marxist commitments and ideologies. So I think like as I've dialogued with people about these issues, one thing that I keep thinking through and how we situate these problems is, we have Luther castigating the Jews who lived in a certain community and even giving approval for their beheading. We have Mary Queen of Scots beheading Protestants here in the UK. And so I think partly I wonder, is this a modern phenomena, or is there something more primordial going on? Theologically, we would say, of course, like original sin, yada yada. I mean, maybe it's not yada yada, but you get what I'm saying. And so I guess what I'm saying is I once thought, maybe as Tom articulated, that we are heading to something, but then you start investigating history and how America was formed and how the British Empire was developed and how they, and it's never been recognizably Christian in the Good Samaritan sense, let's say. It's been Christian in the empire sense, and how it's been that Christianity's been, I mean, we have to call it Christianity, but how Christianity was contextualized under these empire building days, under the days of creating America. And even going back to the revolutionary days, you had loyalists and rebels, right? And these groups tarred and feathered each other. They were socially castigated and absolutely excluded, canceled from all social institutions. And so I think, I mean, obviously this is a very, really important issue, but I think I'm not convinced that what we're experiencing is a new phenomenon. And in fact, to Tom's point, we do see it on the left and the right. And so the question then becomes, how do we measure it? How do we measure the phenomenology? And so I would look, for example, at Trump's rally in Waco, which was compared to his previous rallies, horribly attended, and say, well, there's a waning influence that he's having. Is it on the rise or is he diminishing? In which case that has to be taken into account as we talk about these phenomena as well. So I don't know, this is just my gut reaction feedback. People like me are going to be reading your work. So just, I think, know that this reaction is out there. And
yes,
Max Kennedy wrote how, he's really the pioneer in American thought on how to be an anti-racist. And even among the left, like people they call themselves dark horse liberals, people like Sam Harris, Brett Weinstein, et cetera, who are atheists, neo-atheists, are highly critical of Ibram X. Kendi's work from a completely atheist point of view in terms of the binary categories of racist or anti-racist that he's come up with. So, yeah, and you're trudging through a minefield. I don't.
Yeah, and that's yes. It bothers me as a social scientist because we are seeing a polarization of views the likes we haven't seen. And
so what is your data for that? I think is my question. Like, how do you measure polarization?
Yeah, okay. The polarization, okay, I didn't put this in my presentation, but I watched the 3-hour interrogation of Frances Haugen before a US Senate committee. She was the whistleblower about Facebook and how Facebook works. I watched the 3 hours of it, and I saw that the algorithms are determined in such a way, at least here from her presentation, that they are created to polarize. So if you have a reaction, and Facebook knows this, like anger, whatever you click on, this creates a reaction that makes you stay longer on the site. So the idea of polarizing opinion, which is what these algorithms do, keep you on these social networks for longer. And the youth that I saw, that I mentioned, the Berwick and the Christchurch shooter and the El Paso shooter, were all radicalized in very much these sorts of areas. So there is a method to the madness. There are algorithms at work that want to predict your behavior, and the way to stay longer on these social networks is to be outraged or is to gauge a reaction. So that's from her. And the Senate Issues Committee were amazing. They were just genuinely shocked. There's this whistleblower, which was very high up, and you're welcome to see it explained how they do it. But that doesn't make the issue of the Great Replacement theory more or less difficult. For some people, they're anti-immigration, they're anti-immigrant, they're anti-migrants. But then I once heard the wonderful Tim Costello over here, who was head of World Vision. Well, what are we doing in those countries? And he used to run World Vision. What are we doing in those countries of origin to make them more stable, to make them more effective for these people? How can systems be constructed that can help these people rather than disproportionately further push them into poverty? I think these things are all linked.
Any other comments or questions? Any online?
I can't see. Maybe you can see them.
I'm just looking, Mersina.
Good.
I do not see any more. So,
Okay.
Thank you.
yeah.
Could we watch the video?
Do you want to watch the video? All right.
Yes, it's ready.
Yeah, go ahead.
She
We'll
needs
watch
Whoa.
the video.
Cool. Does that mean I can watch it too?
Can you see it? Not
You
yet.
should be able to
Not
see
yet.
it.
Stop,
Not
sharing.
yet. Stop sharing yours. Share sound. And 0.
Yay! That's the one.
Thank you, Boy Chu.
In Charlottesville, Virginia, for a rally to protest the removal of Confederate monuments. By the end of the day, a counter-protester and 2 police officers would be dead. It was one of the darkest chapters in recent memory and led to a firestorm of controversy that encompassed the city, the nation, and the presidency. The NewsHour's PJ Tobia reminds us what happened that day.
The weekend began with a Friday night torchlight march on the historic grounds of the University of Virginia's campus. The white supremacists had arrived in Charlottesville. The next morning, a large group gathered in a park around a statue of Robert E. Lee. Earlier that summer, local groups demanded the statue's removal. The racists were armed with sticks and heavy shields. One had a handgun. On the street, a much larger group of counter-protesters gathered. Some of them were carrying homemade weapons as well. As more white supremacists made their way to the park, they clashed with counter-protesters. What started as small scuffles soon turned into a full-on melee. One counter-protester, DeAndre Harris, was surrounded and beaten in a nearby parking garage. Then, a few moments of calm as the white nationalists mostly fled downtown.
Fear and hate have been given license in our country. Violence, racialized violence has been given permission in this country, and we are here to stand for love.
But one white supremacist returned. He drove his Dodge Challenger through a crowd of counter-protesters. A short while later, I spoke to NewsHour's Hari Srinivasan about what happened next.
People were calling for medics. There were bloody people on the street. There was someone performing CPR. A lot of people heaving and crying.
32-year-old Heather Heyer was killed in the attack. James Alex Fields Jr., the man behind the wheel, is now awaiting trial for murder, hate crimes, and other charges. The city was grieving. Much of the nation would join them.
We condemn in the strongest possible terms.
Following the attack, President Trump gave multiple responses. But it was 2 days later, in a press conference at Trump Tower in New York, where he said that the racist groups in Charlottesville were not all bad.
You had some very bad people in that group, but you also had people that were very fine people on both sides. You had people in that group, excuse me, I saw the same pictures as you did. You had people in that group that were there to protest the taking down of, to them, a very, very important statue and the renaming of a park from Robert E. Lee to another name.
He would face bipartisan condemnation for the remarks. A state of emergency has been declared in Charlottesville throughout this weekend to prevent a repeat of last year's violence. For the PBS NewsHour, I'm PJ Tobia.
For more on the aftermath of last year's events.
Thank you. That's it. I mean, you're welcome to view the rest of the video, unless you want to see it all. But it's about 15 minutes long, so yeah.
Yeah, we should show the whole video. It's time to end. People need to move. So, but thank you, Mersina. That was good to see that in terms of the kind of things that we were describing of the violence that's beginning to grip. But I agree too that I'm not sure it's necessarily a new thing, but very.
Also, Jonathan Haidt comes to mind, The Coddling of the American Mind. He's documented
Yes.
of social media on the youth.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. I think this is the advent of postmodernism, and I'm quietly, I pray that in the 21st century that we do the Christians, but I'm talking about those that believe in mission, want people to see Jesus, not just as a weak construction as in Nietzsche. I think because I linked Nietzsche with postmodernism, when we think about radicalized people, we see the violence. And the church, I think, in the first world society, they really have to stand up to this. They have to, we can't be siloed. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much for your lecture. Actually, I'm originally Iranian, and that is why when I see something, I see it from my own perspectives. Those terms, modernity, enlightenment, postmodernity, rightly your lecture, it was about the West and the Western meta-narratives. And those terms are very much based on the historical perspective, especially from the society point of view, from in the Europe, and somehow also linked to North America. However, because of the power domination of the West, it's normally also boiled over into the rest of the world, like Africa or Asia. Though even, for example, I remember a long time ago, Gucci, please correct me, in one of the ministers, South Korean minister, was arguing against the word, the concept of postmodernity. He says, okay, how can we describe ourselves in the postmodern world? We never went through the modernity itself from the Western point of view. And however, now we are not actually in the postmodernity, we are in meta-modernity, modernism, postmodernism. I don't know how we can call it really in that sense. I think what we see, the restless world has been always around us. And Europe or North America did see a kind of a period of peace after World War II. And we feel, and because we normally, our memory is very short-sighted. And so during these few years of peace within the Europe or North America, we think the time they were in peace. As you rightly say, it's really not new things. At the moment, I feel Europe and North America join to the rest of the world in relation to restlessness, in relation to being in a transit, and not only social transit, personal transit, political transit, everything. And then the thing is, I feel the West, the new generation in the West, by new generation, I mean even the 30 or 40, they are not equipped to handle the transition because they haven't been in transition since World War II. And the people like us, we constantly are in a transit. The native people of Europe or those white supremacists, they are not Native Americans. But they like to be called Native Americans, but because they haven't seen that, they don't know how to handle the integrated multiculturalism, which you were talking about in that sense. I think it's just, perhaps it is now the time for the scholars in Europe and in North America to think the same way. For example, the rest of the world being in an unresting from the sociological point of view, the rest of they need to be equipped themselves, or they need to learn, and to learn things. Their body system, like COVID virus and our body, were not ready, suddenly hit us, and then we had lots of really casualties. I think maybe it is the time what we're seeing in the West and in Europe from sociological and also socio-political point of view, they are living into this kind of situation. Their system are not ready to accept that kind of things.
Yep.
And then how can make them ready or equip them to make them ready? You are talking about the church, and I'm sorry, I am an observer of the church in the West. I don't think the church is ready to lead that kind of things, because I have seen more racism within the churches in the West than outside of the society in the West. So the church needs to learn. We cannot really take the leadership yet at this stage. We are, as a church, I have to say, we have to first learn ourselves how to, because there are lots of bias, racism, cultural prejudice, bias, and sometimes even we are not aware of that kind of things. I think we are all in the learning point things. And then I'm sure there will be, there has to be a transition. We are going through this transition. Where this transition is leading us, that is a scary part. We need to think.
Yes. Yeah. Can I respond to that, Tom?
Sure, Mersina.
Yeah, thank you. Because these issues have been gurgling around for such a long time for me, and I am a social scientist. My training is in psychology, but then I've taught in the social sciences. And so I've been thinking that if this is where society is going, and I've linked, I've deconstructed, using the postmodern term, I've deconstructed postmodernism in such a way, the linkages are then made. We throw in Nietzsche, we throw in polarization, We throw in the hollowing out of what were once Christian institutions in society, and for many, they still think they are, like the flag and the parliament and, you know, these symbols. But my issue, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, because this is just a beginning for me, because this is what I think about, this is what bothers me. Unless this stuff is being taught in theological colleges from modernity to post-modernity, where I have ridiculed, in a sense, post-modernity that says you can have faith and belief and reason. For modernity, you couldn't have that. It was, I think, therefore I am. So God is dead, long live science, and on it goes. But unless the connections are made in first world culture, I don't think we're coming to terms with radicalization, our own form of racism, perhaps. And you mentioned that you have experienced more racism within the church. Guess what? So have I. And I led a department that was to bring in and change the denomination, which we did in some measure, I'm quite happy to say. So this cannot be taken for granted. Your response, where does the church go from here? It must tackle these issues. It has to tackle these issues. Did you see the women clergy there that was saying at that rally, Charlottesville rally, that they stood for love, that they didn't stand for violence, while the white nationalists were parading themselves? And they were QAnoners, they were KKK, they were Tea Party, the whole conglomeration decided to come out. And I thought they were asleep. I was genuinely shocked by the number of them that came out. So radicalization is in our midst. I wish this stuff was being taught in theological colleges. Now, that may be too far, teaching Nietzsche in theological colleges. I don't know, but we all have to deal with our own racism, I think, our own essentialist tropes.
Okay, with that, we are long past time, so we will bring this session to an end. Thank you, Mersina, and do get some rest, because I know it's late at night when you're at.
Oh, yes.
So
yes.
anyway, thank you so much.
Yeah, well, 12:32. Thank you, guys. Thank you so much. I'm happy for you to correspond with me. This isn't, what I presented isn't static. It isn't set in stone, but it's probably the first time you'll ever hear anything like this. Anyway.
Well, thank you, Tina. Bye-bye.
Be with you. Christ is risen.
Yes,
Yes, he has. Thank you. Thank you. God bless.